So when you plant a seed in the ground, there is this immense amount of blind trust involved, right?
Absolutely.
You dig a hole, you drop in this tiny kind of lifeless looking thing, cover it up, and then you just stare at a patch of empty soil.
Yeah, for days or even weeks.
Exactly. You have zero physical proof that you haven't just buried a pebble. I mean, you are operating purely on the faith that a harvest is actually coming.
And I think that forces a real confrontation with how we, as human beings, actually process time and reward. I mean, all the real work, the germination, the roots breaking out of the shell, it's all happening in complete darkness.
Completely out of sight.
Right, totally out of sight. And the problem is, we are neurologically wired for immediate feedback.
Hmm.
The dopamine hit of a phone notification, the instant return on investment, or just like the quick rush of a fast food meal.
Yeah, we want it now.
We do.
Yeah.
So the idea of waiting for an invisible harvest, it really runs counter to our default psychological setting.
And that tension between our craving for the immediate and the necessity of this invisible long game, that is the core of what we are looking at today on this deep dive.
It's a fascinating tension to explore.
It really is. So for you listening, our mission today is to explore a short but incredibly dense philosophical text that outlines a framework called the Harvest of the Heart.
Along with 5 translated verses from the Quran, specifically Surah Ashura, verses 42.20 through 42.24.
Right. And just to set the stage here, our goal today isn't to take a theological side or, endorse a specific religious worldview. We're just here to impartially unpack the really profound ideas in these texts about human nature, intention, and, well, what it actually means to live a good life.
Just looking at the philosophy of it all.
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack this. To really grasp the architecture of this framework, we have to understand the ultimate goal it sets up, which it calls the harvest.
Right, because if we don't understand that baseline orientation, the rest of the philosophy it doesn't hold together at all.
So what is that baseline?
Well, the framework argues that the foundation for a meaningful life requires cultivating a deep desire for the hereafter over the present moment.
Over that right now.
Yes. Orienting your life toward that ultimate future is how this text defines the very concept of religion.
Interesting. So it's not like a checklist of rules.
No, not at all. It isn't described as a set of static rituals, but really as a compass heading. And verse 32.20 lays down the physics of this orientation.
How so?
It states that if a person desires the harvest of the life to come, they are granted an increase in that harvest. But if they desire only the worldly harvest, they might receive a portion of it here, but they forfeit any share in the future blessings.
Man, it really reminds me of like a cosmic spiritual 401k.
That's a great way to put it.
It's the ultimate test of delayed gratification. Like if you cash out your retirement fund in your 20s to buy a sports car, you get the sports car.
You get to drive it around.
Yeah, and the text acknowledges that, saying, we may give something thereof in this world. You get the immediate worldly harvest. But when you are 70, your account is totally empty.
Exactly. You sacrificed the compounding long-term reality for a fleeting short-term gain. What's fascinating here is the deliberate choice of the agricultural metaphor over a transactional one.
What do you mean by that?
Well, a harvest cannot be hacked. I mean,
Like-
you can't cram for a harvest the way you cram for a final exam the night before.
Oh, wow, right. You can't just pull an all-nighter and make a cornfield grow.
Exactly. It is the mathematical, biological result of a specific set of consistent actions over a really long period. Preparing the soil, planting, waiting, and just trusting the process.
So the text is making a psychological argument about human focus.
It is, where you fix your gaze permanently alters the trajectory of your actions, and thus alters what you eventually reap.
And the text notes that for those oriented toward the long term, they don't just get an equal return on what they planted, they get an increase. Like the system actively scales their effort.
Yes, the return is magnified.
But that brings up a pretty huge operational problem, I think.
Which is,
If setting this internal compass toward the future is the primary goal, what disrupts the signal? Like, what happens when we inevitably start chasing the short-term gains anyway?
well, the philosophy immediately addresses that vulnerability. It contrasts the ideal orientation with the trap of what it calls the wrongdoers.
Right, in verse 42.21.
Yeah, verse 42.21 asks a rhetorical question about those who fail to maintain this long-term vision. It asks, do they have associate gods who have laid down for them a religion without the permission of God?
Okay, I have to be honest, I struggle a bit with the idea of associate gods here.
Outcome.
When I hear that phrase, my mind immediately jumps to ancient history, like people bowing to literal stone statues or golden calves in the desert. It sounds so archaic.
Right. It feels disconnected from modern life.
Yeah. How does this actually apply to the psychology of someone navigating, say, life, career, and relationships today? Could this be read as a warning against anything we falsely prioritize?
Oh, absolutely. If we look at the underlying mechanism, an associate God is really simply whatever occupies the absolute center of your value system.
So whatever you worship, essentially.
Exactly. It's the ultimate metric by which you measure your worth. Today, that might be the hyper-curation of a digital persona on social media,
Oh, for sure.
or the relentless pursuit of venture capital, or just an obsession with social status. When you place those things at the center of your life, they effectively lay down a religion for you.
A religion of like hustle culture or vanity.
Right. A rigid set of moral dictates, sacrifices, and rituals that you obey blindly. The text is warning that allowing these false, unendorsed priorities to govern your actions fundamentally breaks your compass.
It's like you're pouring all your water on a plastic plant expecting an actual harvest.
That's a perfect analogy. And the psychological toll of doing that is mapped out in the very next verse, 42.22.
Right. It says, "You will see the wrongdoers fearful of the consequences of their deeds, which will be inescapable."
Notice the phrasing there. It doesn't say they will be punished eventually in the afterlife.
No, it says you can see them actively living in fear of the consequences right now.
It's a brilliant observation of cognitive dissonance, really. Deep down, when you orient your life around a false metric, say, prioritizing career dominance at the expense of every personal relationship, your psyche knows the harvest you are planting is toxic.
You can feel it.
You can. That inescapable fear the text mentions, that is modern existential dread.
Wow.
It's the burnout. It's the imposter syndrome. It's that quiet anxiety that wakes you up at 3 a.m. because you suddenly realize you are optimizing your life for a game that doesn't actually matter.
You cannot outrun the natural psychological consequences of setting your compass to a false north.
You really can.
But the contrast to that state of dread is incredibly vivid in the text. It goes on to describe those who maintain the right compass, those who believe and do righteous deeds.
Right, the alternative path.
Yeah. It says, "They will be in the meadows of the garden and shall have whatever they desire from their Lord." It's framed as the supreme favor. I love that imagery. We move from the dry, anxious, inescapable fear of the wrongdoers straight into these lush, expansive meadows.
It completely resolves the tension of that opening metaphor we discussed.
A seed in the dark.
Exactly. The seed that was buried in complete darkness, the one that required bypassing all those dopamine hits of instant gratification, it finally breaks ground. The meadows of the garden represent the ultimate validation of maintaining that long-term orientation.
The invisible work becomes a permanent reality.
Yes.
But, reaching those meadows isn't something you do in isolation, is it? The framework really emphasizes that doing these good and great things is deeply tied to the people around us.
Oh, absolutely. You can't cultivate a massive harvest entirely on your own.
Which brings us to how the text views community and relationships, specifically when we look at verse 42.23.
The social mechanics outlined here are vital. Verse 42.23 gives glad tidings to righteous servants, but it anchors this in a very specific relational dynamic. The messenger in the text delivers a really fascinating caveat regarding duty and motivation.
Yeah, the quote is, "Say, I do not ask of you any reward for it except love of kinship."
This raises an important question about how ethical obligation is framed here. The messenger isn't demanding monetary tribute or absolute political submission or just transactional obedience as a reward for this philosophical guidance.
Right, none of that.
The requested reward is simply the love of kinship. It's an appeal to human connection and empathy.
Just treating each other like family, basically.
Basically, yes. The text is suggesting that true righteousness is tethered to how we relate to one another. The long-term harvest is impossible without cultivating love within our communities, our families, and our broader human networks.
That relational aspect gets supercharged in the second half of that verse, I think. Well, it says, "Whoever earns a good deed, we shall increase its good for him. God is most forgiving, most appreciative." And that phrase, "increase its good for him," it sounds exactly like a network effect to me.
A network effect.
Yeah, like moral compound interest. Loving the right people and finding that kinship, it creates a sociological feedback loop. If I do something good for my community, that community becomes a bit stronger, which then empowers someone else to do good, which eventually bounces back to me.
That's a really sharp way to look at it. It demonstrates how the environment nurtures the seed.
Right.
If you surround yourself with individuals who value the long term, who prioritize ethical action over immediate gratification, your capacity for good multiplies exponentially.
You aren't just relying on your own limited willpower anymore.
Exactly. You are drawing on the momentum of the collective.
I'm also really struck by the word appreciative at the end of that verse. God is described as most forgiving, most appreciative.
It's an interesting choice of words, isn't it?
It is, because I feel like we are so culturally conditioned to view religious frameworks as purely punitive, like a rigid hierarchy of a boss and a freely expendable employee just waiting to be fired for making a mistake.
A very fear-based model.
Yeah, exactly. But appreciative implies a relationship where human effort is seen, valued, and cherished.
It shifts the entire paradigm from servitude under a tyrant to, well, collaborative cultivation.
Yeah.
An appreciative system implies that human agency genuinely matters.
That what we do actually counts.
Yes. Your ethical choices, your attempts to do good, despite the temptation of immediate reward, they are not just a minimum baseline requirement to avoid punishment, they are recognized and actively expanded upon.
It totally reframes the universe as a responsive, deeply invested partner in your moral development.
It does.
Okay, so we've mapped out the external mechanics here. We have the macro goal of the long-term harvest, the danger of adopting modern associate gods that trigger existential dread, and the compounding network effect of kinship and good deeds.
Right, the external framework.
But the title of this framework is The Harvest of the Heart. Up until now, we've mostly talked about actions, communities, orientations. How does the internal invisible world actually govern all this external output?
Well, the entire system hinges on the internal receiver. The final 2 points of the framework shift the focus away from external behavior entirely and place the burden of navigation on the internal self.
And here's where it gets really interesting. The framework states we must identify good and guidance by looking inside us for answers, by relying on intuition.
Yes.
And it goes further, claiming that we communicate with God through our hearts. Placing the ultimate trust in human intuition as the primary antenna for divine guidance feels radically empowering and almost surprisingly modern for an ancient textual analysis.
It really redefines what the heart actually is. In this philosophical context, the heart isn't just a biological pump for blood, nor is it just a metaphor for fleeting emotions like we often use it today.
Right, like follow your heart on a greeting card.
Exactly, it's not that. It is a highly calibrated organ of spiritual perception. Think of intuition not as a random gut feeling, but as the accumulation of your deepest, most aligned subconscious wisdom.
So it's actively processing information.
Yes. It is the instrument that detects the signal of the long-term harvest amidst all the noise of the immediate world.
Which makes the final verse, 42.24, incredibly heavy.
It does.
The verse starts by addressing people who accuse the messenger of inventing a lie about God. But the text doesn't counter by providing a list of external, empirical miracles or proofs. It counters with a psychological warning. It says, if God so willed, he could seal your heart.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the mechanics of a sealed heart represent the ultimate tragedy in this framework.
Why is that the ultimate tragedy?
Well, if the heart is your communication device, your antenna for identifying good through intuition, then having it sealed means you lose the signal entirely.
You're just flying blind.
Exactly.
So what does a sealed heart actually look like in practice today? Because it sounds like a metaphor for something much more insidious than just, being a little stubborn.
A sealed heart is the endpoint of chronic cynicism and repeated misalignment. Neurologically and psychologically, when you continuously ignore your intuition, when you constantly choose the immediate selfish reward over the ethical long-term choice, you begin to desensitize your own moral receptors.
You build callousness.
Yes. Eventually, the somatic markers that tell you something is wrong, they just stop firing. You become completely numb.
Wow.
In today's world, a sealed heart looks like the person who is so entrenched in algorithmic echo chambers, or so obsessed with their associate gods of wealth or status that they're literally incapable of feeling empathy or recognizing truth when it's standing right in front of them.
The receiver is just broken.
Broken and shut down.
They are trapped in the immediate worldly harvest because they no longer possess the internal equipment to perceive anything else.
Precisely.
The verse concludes with a really powerful resolution to this. It says, God wipes out falsehood and vindicates the truth by his words. He has full knowledge of what is in men's hearts. It really brings the entire philosophy full circle.
It completely strips away the illusion of performance.
How so?
You can hack your external metrics, you can fool your community, your followers, and perhaps even fool yourself into thinking your false orientations are noble.
Fake it till you make it.
Right. But you cannot fool the fundamental architecture of reality. The system operates on absolute transparency at the deepest level. The harvest you ultimately reap is a direct, unavoidable outgrowth of the true, unvarnished state of your internal receiver.
So if your intuition has been sealed by a lifetime of falsehood, that is exactly what will grow.
Yes. And if it remains open, vulnerable, and aligned with truth, it will be vindicated.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Let's trace the thread of what we've uncovered today. We started by recognizing that a meaningful life requires the difficult psychological work of delaying immediate gratification.
Right. Planting seeds for an ultimate long-term harvest.
And we saw how easily that orientation can be derailed when we install associate gods, those modern idols of status, wealth, or ego, at the center of our lives.
Which leads inevitably to a state of inescapable existential dread.
We explored how avoiding that dread requires action, specifically actions supercharged by the network effect of loving our kinship. Goodness compounds when we cultivate it within a community under the gaze of a deeply appreciative system.
And finally, we realized that this entire external architecture is entirely dependent on a single internal mechanism, the heart.
The antenna?
Yes, the intuitive antenna that must be carefully protected from becoming calloused or sealed by the noise of the world.
It's a philosophy that demands absolute internal honesty. I mean, you can't fake the soil you're planting in.
You really can't. And that leaves us with a final thought to consider as you step back into the noise of your day.
What's that?
The text makes it clear that the heart is an active, perceptive organ one that is shaped by every choice you make, either remaining open to the subtle signals of truth or slowly sealing itself shut.
Right.
So if the system has full knowledge of what is truly inside that internal space, and the heart is the very soil where your ultimate future is germinating, where it is germinating, what does the harvest of your own heart look like right now in those quiet moments when the seed is buried in the dark and absolutely nobody else is looking?
A profound question to carry forward. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it gave you some valuable tools to navigate the noise. Until next time, keep exploring and keep trusting the invisible work.